fundamentally, one of the things that we need to improve on the car for next year is get the car to have more downforce at the lower drag levels, and then we can race those lighter wings and still be competitive in the corners. So why were we so slow on the straights compared to the others? Well, we decided to stay at our highest downforce level. Now, part of that decision was that it was actually giving us the best lap times in the race condition, where we were going to get high degradation in the dry. But we'd also seen this rain that was coming in on Sunday, and we felt that in a wet race that might be a benefit. Now, as it happens, the DRS was never enabled. That meant that overtaking was very, very hard. And perhaps the right decision would have been to bias to a lower downforce setting. But fundamentally, one of the things that we need to improve on the car for next year is get the car to have more downforce at the lower drag levels, and then we can race those lighter wings and still be competitive in the corners. Why did we start Q1 on the medium tyre? Well, we knew that that lap was never going to be fast enough to put us through, but we also saw that on the soft tyre you could only get one good lap time out of it. There was quite a big drop from the first lap to the second lap, and given the performance of our car, we wanted to run that new tyre right at the end. So the real reason that we decided to take that medium early on was just to give the drivers a bit of a warm-up run so they could get into it before they ran the soft later in the first session. Had the team considered immediately switching to intermediates as the safety car came in? Well, yes, this is a conversation that we'd had with the drivers. We'd prepared all the pit crews. The drivers knew what they wanted to do if they made that decision. But ultimately, they're the ones who can see what the track's like, where the rivers are. They can feel how much grip they've got, and we need to let them be in charge of making that decision. Now, for Sebastian and Nicholas, it was easier to decide to take the risk. They were at the back anyway, and ultimately they would have probably caught up if there was another safety car, were it the wrong choice. For our drivers, though, they didn't feel it was quite right at that point to make the jump, and they decided to stay on and start the race. Was it the right decision to do the double stack pit stop? Well, we've gone through all the timing of that, and we've concluded that no, it wasn't the right decision. We should have done what George was asking, which was to give him the lap in clean air. Now, we had seen that the intermediates were a lot quicker, so the ex-wet you would have lost time on track, but the problem was George and Lewis were a bit too close for us to be able to do the pit stop without losing some time, and that time ultimately cost George the position to Tsunoda and possibly even the position to Lando. So it gave him a bit more of a challenge to deal with, having to pass those cars to try and find any clean air. With more time left in the race, would there have been a better chance for Lewis to pass Esteban? Well, in reality, probably, because we seem to have better degradation. Esteban's tyres would have been dropping, and maybe that would have given us an opportunity to get through. But the big issue was that DRS wasn't enabled, our straight line speed wasn't as high as that of the Alpine, and on a circuit like that, the only way you can really pass is to make the pass on those straights. So it would have been difficult. I think it comes down more to anything than the fact that the DRS wasn't enabled. So what is our view on the situation with the recovery vehicle and Gasly? Well, Formula One is actually very good on the safety issues at sitting down, all the teams working together and trying to make sure that the sport is as safe as it can possibly be. So that situation is definitely going to get reviewed. There's a number of elements to it though. The first one is actually, should the race have even been started when it was? Because when the cars left the grid, you could see there was quite a lot of spray. The drivers were calling to say the conditions were difficult, and perhaps at that point we should have just aborted the start and waited rather than sent the cars off. But that will be one of the questions that will be asked. It was also unusual under those very low grip conditions that even if you were driving at the safety car delta speed, it was still very difficult to stay on track. The visibility was extremely poor, and we would have probably needed to be going even slower to make sure it's safe. And then the question about timing of sending recovery vehicles out while there are still cars going around the circuit. So all of those elements will be reviewed. There are always going to be situations where you need to get support vehicles to cars. There might be a driver stuck in there to assist them while there's cars on track. So it's impossible to say that this is something that we can't ever do, but clearly on this occasion it did look quite dangerous, but principally because of the very low grip and the poor visibility. So what sort of upgrade are we bringing to Austin? Well, it's our final step of aero development, and that'll hopefully give us a bit more performance. But importantly, with every step we're learning more and more, and that learning we can carry into next year. So that's part of it. Also, there's a few bits where we've taken some weight out of components that will hopefully get the car closer to the weight limit. It's very difficult for us to predict where we're going to be. In Singapore, Lewis was awfully close to pole position, yet in Suzuka both cars had a big gap to the front. Now, our race pace has been reasonably strong, so if we can make a step, hopefully we can get into the fight with the Ferraris and the Red Bulls, but qualifying for us is the really difficult one to predict at the moment. But as I said, a lot of it is about learning, and we're certainly going to give it our best shot in the final 4 races. Will Austin suit the W13? Well, it's a tricky circuit, and it was a tricky circuit for us last year. It was very bumpy, there was a lot of overheating as well from the tyres, and we weren't performing as well as Red Bull were on the softer tyres. Now, they've done some resurfacing, so hopefully those issues with the bumps are a bit less. But what's very hard this year is to really know where are you going to be on a circuit before you've gone there. And as I said in a previous answer, a lot of it is about learning, but we're not really going to make any predictions about where we're going to perform. We just need to go there on Friday, see what kind of issues we have, and then see whether we can solve those with setup. Thank you again for all of your questions. Join us in 2 weeks' time after the US Grand Prix.